Welcome to the GSMC Financial News Podcast, the show that delves into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the worlds of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we've got you covered.
Hello. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Financial News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Virginia Lucci, coming at you live from my house in the hottest city of the world, Montgomery, Alabama. Today, we'll be covering the word on the street and what we're looking forward to next week on Wall Street. We'll try to understand the Trump executive order. I'll give you part 2 of our Notorious Financial Criminal series. Today we're looking at Pharma Bro. And as always, we're going to end the show with my top 10. This week, we're going to look at the top 10 highest grossing mobile game apps. Before we go any further, as always, I want to give you a disclaimer. I'm not providing any legal or financial advice. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Don't come at me if things don't work out like we've talked about. The economy is changing by the second. As always, if you have questions, visit an attorney or financial professional for advice tailored to your needs. Now let's get to it. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rallied on Monday as gains in economically sensitive stocks offset losses from major cap tech names such as Microsoft. The 30-stock Dow advanced 300 points, or more than 1%. Boeing and Nike were among the best performing stocks in the Dow, rising more than 4% each. Caterpillar, considered to be a bellwether for the global economy, climbed more than 4%. JP Chase also contributed to the Dow's gains, rising 1.2%. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 climbed 0.2% as the energy and industrial sectors rose more than 2% each. Energy is the worst performing sector in the S&P 500 for 2020, having lost more than 37% of its value. Industrials are down more than 5%. This actually suggests investors are turning to more sanguine on the broader macro landscape, encouraged by the solid second quarter July economic data last week, according to Adam Crisafulli of Vital Knowledge. Monday's gain put the S&P 500 about 1.1% below its February 19th record high. However, the NASDAQ composite struggled and dropped 0.4% as traders trimmed positions in big tech stocks. Facebook and Netflix shares slid at least 1.7%, each along with Microsoft. Amazon dipped 0.8%, and Alphabet, Google's parent company, fell 0.4%. Monday's moves came after President Donald Trump signed several executive orders over the weekend aimed at extending coronavirus relief. These orders continue the distribution of expanded unemployment benefits, defer student loan payments through 2020, and provide a payroll tax holiday. However, the unemployment benefit will be continued at a reduced rate of $400 per week. Originally, the benefit provided workers with $600 per week as they were impacted by the pandemic. While this move by Trump may lead to legal challenges, politically it puts pressure on Congress to reach a deal, according to Bill Stone, who's a chief investment officer at Stone Investment Partners. Trump's move comes after congressional leaders failed to make progress on a new coronavirus stimulus package last week. Several benefits from a package signed earlier in the year, lapsed at the end of July, raising uncertainty about the U.S. economy moving forward. Still, Trump's orders face a legal challenge as continuing the programs would require federal funding, which Congress controls. Democrats have insisted they do not support a bill that does not extend the $600 per week benefit. And we'll get into that a little bit more in our next segment. Investors are happy about this news. By September, another round of fiscal support will create positive momentum. The reopening of schools, even if only in some states, will enforce the positive momentum by 1. Boosting back-to-school shopping, and 2. Allowing more parents to return to work in September. And this is according to Chief Financial Economist at Jefferies, Annetta Markowska. And I hope I'm saying that right. Bottom line, all the stars are lining up for another inflection point in activity and a second leg up in the reopening. So hopefully she's right. And this could all be good news going forward in the third quarter. Wall Street was coming off a strong weekly performance. The Dow rose 3.8% last week for its biggest weekly gain since June. The S&P 500 climbed 2.5%, along with NASDAQ Composites. Last week's gains come during a historically tough time for the market, as August kicks off the worst 3-month stretch for the S&P 500. Let's get into things with a little bit more detail. I remember the day before lockdown started, everybody started selling stocks in the hospitality region. So Royal Caribbean, Disney, any vacation properties, people were selling those like it was going out of style. Well, now things are taking a turn. In early afternoon trading on Monday, shares of Royal Caribbean are leading the cruise sector higher, up 10.9% as of 12 o'clock on Monday. This was after their reporting earnings were released this morning. Rivals Carnival and Norwegian Cruise Lines Holdings are following suit, up 7.7% and 8.6% respectively. But if you ask me, it all started with Royal Caribbean. Monday was earnings day for Royal Caribbean, and in contrast to rival Norwegian Cruise Line last week, it appears that Royal Caribbean beat on revenue. Heading into earnings, analysts had forecast that Royal Caribbean would incur a pro forma $4.82 per share loss for its fiscal second quarter, and with cruises suspended, they forecast revenue of only $43.5 million. Royal Caribbean's loss actually came in bigger than expected at $6.13 per share pro forma, and its GAAP loss was even worse at $7.83 per share. Still, Royal Caribbean's revenue was quite a bit better than predicted at $175.6 million, and investors seem to be focusing on that bright note today. Now, what? Should investors be so optimistic? Royal Caribbean correctly blamed the coronavirus pandemic, which forced cancellations of all of its second quarter sailings for both the steep decline in revenue and the huge GAAP loss. The COVID pandemic is posing an unprecedented challenge to our industry and society, said CEO Richard Fain. And despite investors' reactions to today's revenue news, the challenge may be getting more serious, not less. The last we heard, Royal Caribbean was targeting a cash burn rate of $250 million to $275 million per month, while its ships are confined to port. In today's report, the company said that its monthly cash burn is now averaging somewhere from $250 million to $290 million. Thus, as we saw with Norwegian Cruise Line last week, cash burn rates appear to be edging higher, fighting management efforts to drive them lower. Based on Royal Caribbean's statement that it has approximately $4.1 billion, all in the form of cash and cash equivalents, even a $290 million a month burn rate implies that it still has more than a year of cash left to fund it through the tail end of this recession. Hopefully the recession will end by then, but we'll see. If burn rates keep rising beyond what's planned that would clearly be a risk worth keeping an eye on for shareholders in Royal Caribbean and for investors in other cruise stocks as well. Now for the problems. Mohammed El-Iran told CSNBC Monday that he considers a wave of corporate bankruptcies as the biggest risk to the stock market's rally from coronavirus-era lows. I think what derails this market isn't more the China-U.S. tension, he said. It isn't more political differences. It would be if we get then large-scale bankruptcies, according to the chief economic advisor at Allianz. This derails the market. Otherwise, you have a very strong technical supporting marketplace. El-Iran's comments come as Democrats and the Trump administration's negotiators have been unable to strike a deal. As we know, tensions between the U.S. and China have also been rising, particularly regarding Beijing's sweeping national security law in Hong Kong and Trump's recent executive orders involving the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok and Tencent's popular messaging app WeChat. Stocks have so far continued to show strength despite the backdrop of the geopolitical flare-ups and the Washington back and forth. The Dow Jones is up more than 250 points on Monday, building off of a gain last week. S&P 500 is close to the February 19th high. So what could be wrong? El-Iran contended that the market's rally in recent weeks has really been about technical indicators, allowing for equities to continue moving higher even in spite of the coronavirus pandemics and other headwinds. It's all been about technicals, and that allows the market to over and over again to shrug off the fundamentals. Do I think there's a limit to technicals supporting markets on their own? Yes. And it just can go on for quite a while. So I think what he's saying is that we're kind of on borrowed time here. That everything looks good, but that may not honestly be the case. El-Iran correctly predicted the coronavirus sell-off and that it would continue until a bear market was reached, but he's been cautious about the recovery. He worries about the structurally embedded economic damage that significant bankruptcies may usher in. Bankruptcies go from short-term liquidity problems to long-term solvency problems. If you get that, then unemployment becomes more problematic and you get capital impairment. He continued, believe me, if there's one thing Federal Reserve money cannot help markets through, it's capital impairment events. He added that a plateauing in the U.S. economy recovery from the worst of the coronavirus-related carnage would still leave bankruptcies on the table. We need growth to pick up again, he said. We need to get back to this notion of the V-shaped recovery as opposed to a square root or anywhere where we come up and then level off. In another death knell for the malls of America, shares of Simon Property Group jumped Monday following a report that the biggest U.S. mall owner is in talks with Amazon to turn shuttered Sears and Jcpenney stores into warehouses, as it looks to fill vacant space and collect more rent. Simon's stock was up more than 10% in trading ahead of its earnings report after the markets close on Monday. Amazon's discussions with Simon are focused on turning some ailing department store spaces into last-mile fulfillment centers. The Wall Street Journal reported Sunday, citing people familiar with the situation. Both Sears and Jcpenney have filed for bankruptcy protection, Sears in October 2018 and Jcpenney just this last May, as department stores have largely fallen out of favor with shoppers. These two companies have been looking to close underperforming stores as they try to mount a turnaround. Simon declined to comment on the report, and Amazon has a policy of not commenting on rumors or speculation. According to the Journal report, it is unclear how many spaces inside of Simon's malls are being considered by Amazon. The company operates 63 Jcpenney locations and 11 Sears stores, according to the most recent public filings in May. Real estate analysts view the potential move as a positive one, at least in the near term, considering how hard the retail landscape has been hit by the coronavirus pandemic. Already, more than 40 retailers have filed for bankruptcy in 2020, and permanent store closures announced by retailers this year have topped 4,000 and are on pace to break a new record, according to tracking by Coresight Research. My inner 13-year-old mall rat is absolutely crushed, but I think this is a good move, and I'm glad that we may be able to repurpose some of our biggest buildings in the country. So with that, I'm going to put my inner 13-year-old mall rat to bed, and I'm going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I'll be untangling the economic recovery, and stay around to the end of the show where we'll be talking about the top 10 biggest mobile gaming apps.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we looked at the week on Wall Street. As I've always said, the stock market may not always be the best predictor of the overall economy. So, what's the status on Capitol Hill? Democrats and Republicans are still trying to come up with a plan. The White House and Democrats have clashed for weeks about what to do with the $600 enhanced weekly unemployment benefit. It expired at the end of July, so now we're really entering into a time where people don't have that extra $600. Democratic leaders on Friday said the White House refused to meet with them even halfway in negotiations, which dragged on for 2 weeks with little signs of progress. The discussions were meant to provide additional relief to address the coronavirus pandemic's economic fallout. This time, there seemed to be little goodwill or trust, and both sides dug in even as the economic recovery actually showed signs of losing streams. Millions of Americans remained unemployed, and deaths from the novel coronavirus continued to climb. Democrats insisted they were still open to negotiations and said they had already tried to make concessions, but White House officials suggested that, absent a dramatically new approach from the Democrats, they were done trying to craft a deal and wanted to move ahead with the executive orders. Over the weekend, Trump issued the executive order and 3 memoranda from his golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey. Americans still want to know what this means. How can these unilateral actions help? We touched on it a little bit in our first segment, but I want to take the opportunity to really look at this and see what exactly is going to happen. Is this going to hurt Americans? Will there be a second stimulus check or a larger rescue package coming? Are Trump's actions even legal? We'll start with unemployment. Under the previous unemployment benefit passed by Congress, millions of Americans received this $600 a week. Following Trump's memorandum, the federal government would contribute $300 of the $400 payment. Individual states, already pinching pennies amid the coronavirus outbreak, are responsible for the remaining $100 per person per week. And this will retroactively start on August 1st. It's possible state governors could push back on footing 25% of the bill. On top of that, a state must agree to enter into this financial agreement with the federal government for any unemployed person living there to get any of the additional benefits. So this is by no means guaranteed. On Sunday night, Trump said he was open to allowing people to get the enhanced benefit without states picking up some of the cost. He said it was possible that the federal government could pick up the entire cost if the governors make the request. So again, we're relying on states' governors to actually be proactive with this. We have a system where we can do 100% or we can do 75%. They pay 25%, and it will depend on the state, to quote the president. And they will make an application. We will look at it and we'll make a decision. So I'm not really sure what that means. Many states have already asked the federal government for major financial help. There are major questions about how many states may be able to afford the extra cost. If a state says that it does not have the funds or does not want to enter into the agreement with the federal government, the unemployed person in that state receives $0 in extra federal benefits. They would still receive the normal unemployment insurance, but none of the additional supplement. In fact, states have asked Congress to provide them with an additional $500 billion to help shore up their budgets, which have been crushed by the loss of tax revenue amid the pandemic. This has been one of the main points of contention between the Democrats, who want to allocate additional aid, and the Republicans, who don't want to bail out what they say are badly managed states. Millions of Americans who've filed for jobless benefits also have drained several states' unemployment benefit trust funds. Already, 10 states have borrowed nearly $20 billion from the Treasury Department to cover their share of payments, which typically lasts 26 weeks. This is going to require a new system because Congress has not authorized the extension of federal unemployment assistance. The state will have to set up an entirely new system to deliver the additional aid. The state has to enter an agreement saying not only can they pay the benefit, but they have some ability to administer the benefit, according to Michelle Evermore, an unemployment expert at the National Employment Law Project. Building a brand new program could take states months to accomplish. Evermore added Trump needed to do it this way because in order for states to administer a benefit, it has to be authorized by Congress, so they can't use their administrative systems to pay a benefit that hasn't been authorized by Congress. So the states actually have to be the middleman between the president and the unemployment benefit. Few will be helped. The chances of this effort helping many of the newly unemployed due to COVID-19 is relatively low. Lastly, according to the memorandum, an individual can only receive the $300 federal benefit if he or she first qualifies for $100 in aid from their state. This will cut people out of a large group. This will cut out a large group of people. There are so many problems with people getting a benefit under this. So, how does the president think that this is going to be funded? Trump is unilaterally seeking to use leftover unspent FEMA funds to pay unemployment benefits. So, what does that mean? At least $25 billion of total disaster relief fund balances will be set aside to support ongoing disaster response and recovery efforts as potential 2020 major disaster cost. Experts predict that this is going to be an extremely active hurricane season. So, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, hurricanes can cost upwards of $22 billion per storm. So, are we taking from one to give to the other? And does that put us more at risk? Looking at the eviction protections. So, the eviction protections have not been renewed yet. The CARES Act banned late fees and eviction filings until July 25th, only on properties that were backed by federal mortgage programs like Fannie Mae, or those that receive federal funds like HUD. The Republican-authored HEALS Act didn't address stipulations on evictions, and Trump's executive order is surprisingly low on detail. It leaves the decision to ban evictions in the hands of Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Robert Redfield, taking no official stance itself. The Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Director of the CDC shall consider whether any measures temporarily halting residential evictions of any tenant for failure to pay rent are reasonably necessary to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 from one state or possession into any other state or possession, the White House's memo said. So, I don't know where that leaves us. If you're facing eviction, it's worth the time and effort to seek out a local attorney who can help you maneuver through your local laws and any other applicable federal programs that you may be eligible. The next issue that's keeping us up at night is student loan payment. Student loan payment deferral extends the original deadline, according to the White House's memorandum. Your student loan payments may be waived along with the interest until July 31st, 2020. This extends the current relief under the CARES Act that is set to expire at the end of September. Payments are scheduled to restart on January 1st, 2021. Democrats have pushed for extending the relief into another year and making private student loans eligible. In March, Trump waived student loan interest by executive order, and the administration said borrowers could request a deferment on their payments. Congress later codified that policy into law and took it a step further by automatically suspending monthly payment. But here's the catch. Trump's memo applies to loans that are held by the Department of Education, which doesn't include privately held student loans, such as through a bank. So before you cancel your auto draft, check your status. If you're not eligible for aid but cannot pay your loan, call your loan provider for options such as deferment. So our next issue is the payroll tax deferment. How does it work? This is a pet project of Trump's that he's been pushing for months. The Payroll Tax Holidays seeks to defer your federal tax withholdings, which means you take home more money per paycheck, but that's only temporary. Since this is a deferral and not a forgiveness, you would still have to pay those taxes after the deferral period passes, without having to pay additional interest or tax. The memo includes language to explore avenues for eliminating the deferred tax altogether, but nothing is said. So the fine print is that Trump's memorandum covers the 4-month period from September 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020 for people that earn less than $100,000 per year or less than $4,000 every 2 weeks pre-tax. The memo's language specifies that Mnuchin, as Treasury Secretary, can exercise his authority to defer the withholding, deposit, and payment of the tax. According to the code cited, Mnuchin could extend this for 1 year. The payroll tax measure that Trump signed Saturday does not actually reduce the payroll taxes. Let me say that again. You are not getting out of having to pay your payroll taxes. At least now. It defers the due date for the portion of those taxes paid by the employee. This is similar to Treasury's deferring the federal income tax due date this year from July 15th to July 15th from April 15th. We still needed to get our taxes paid. We just had 3 extra months in which to pay them. The payroll taxes are still due. Companies may not want to stop withholding the employee's share of the taxes from their paycheck for that reason. So this really isn't a win for anybody. But Trump also said that if he's reelected, he would seek to forgive the levy and make permanent cuts to the payroll taxes. But the power to change the tax law lies with Congress, not the White House. Despite Trump's claims that it's popular, making changes to the payroll tax has not won many fans on either side of the aisle, in part because it wouldn't help the unemployed. Also, any cuts to the levies could hurt the finances of Social Security and Medicare, which are already feeling a lot of fiscal pressure. When lawmakers temporarily reduced the payroll taxes in 2011, they reimbursed the Social Security's trust fund out of the general revenue. Late Sunday, Trump insisted the proposal would have zero impact on Social Security, even as he's looking to make permanent the deferral of payroll taxes. He said Social Security would still be funded through the general fund, and he promised to protect the program. So, I don't know how that's going to actually look. In my opinion, your Social Security, retirement, your Medicare, all of that is something you've already paid. You're lending the federal government money, and you are going to seek to collect it after your workable years are through. So anything that would affect the Social Security system, I think, is a little iffy and a little controversial. So I'll leave that there. So what about a second stimulus? Stimulus check discussions could ramp up again this week, with Democratic leaders repeating their call for bipartisan negotiations to agree on a more comprehensive solution. So it's not out of the picture. Democratic Minority Whip Dick Durbin said Sunday that we're ready to meet the White House and Republicans halfway. We've said that from the start. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin didn't confirm whether talks would restart, but expressed openness to the possibility. If we can get a fair deal, we're willing to do it this week. If talks resume swiftly, the legislation could presumably go to a vote in one chamber as soon as Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. Maybe even when you're listening to this podcast, you'll know the answer. Both chambers must vote before the legislation lands on Trump's desk for a signature. If a deal is reached in the coming weeks, it's also possible that the executive action will be null and void. So, could Trump be sued? Congress is authorized with writing and passing laws regarding financial decisions. The The White House can't forgive taxes without congressional approval. When asked if he was concerned about the legality of an executive action during a press conference on Friday, the president said, "No, not at all." Well, you always get sued. Everything you do, you get sued. So, what does this all mean? Honestly, I feel like there's a lot of promises, but it's making American citizens jump through a lot of hoops. And a lot of Americans may not even know what hoops they have to jump through. I don't think this is going to help everyone, and it's difficult to really see where we go from here. At least the parties are willing to go back to the negotiating table, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with something that is a little better for the American people. So with that, I'm going to take another quick break. And when we come back, I'll be continuing our series of most notorious financial criminals with the Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli. And we're going to end the show on a high note with my top 10 most successful gaming apps. Is your favorite on the list? Stay tuned until the end of the show to find out.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Our last segment was kind of confusing. There's been a lot of talk about what we need to do to help people economically affected by the pandemic, but really no one knows the answers. So it's all a guessing game. Well, I'm going to pivot a little bit, and we're going to go on to our continuing series about the most notorious financial criminals, Martin Shkreli. Even before his 2015 arrest on securities fraud allegations, Wall Street's most visible villain was infamous for gouging AIDS patients and pregnant women and trolling the world on Twitter. Just who is this guy, and where did he come from, and what is he doing right now? Shkreli is a 38-year-old high school dropout who held thousands of lives in his hands when he purchased the manufacturing license for the anti-parasitic drug Daraprim. Okay, well, that may not be entirely fair, but it's true that Shkreli dropped out of the prestigious Hunter College High School on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. He received his diploma from City School High School, earning credits from an internship with the Wall Street hedge fund Kramer, Berkowitz and Company, and has allegedly received a bachelor's degree in business administration. He had the typical Hollywood story. Started in the mailroom at Kramer, Berkowitz and Company. He displayed a talent right off the bat for smoking out small biotech scams. So Shkreli got to know a small group of investors who focused on shorting such stocks, betting that they'll go down when they prove ineffective or don't get FDA approval. Shkreli worked as a financial analyst for Intrepid Capital Management and UBS Wealth Management. He then started his first hedge fund, Ely Capital Management, in 2006. In 2007, Lehman Brothers sued Ely in New York State Court for failing to cover a put option transaction in which Shkreli bet the wrong way on a broad market decline. When stocks rose, Shkreli didn't have the funds to make the bank whole. In October of 2007, Lehman Brothers won a $2.3 million default judgment against Shkreli and Ely, but Lehman collapsed before it could collect on the ruling. Shkreli shut the firm down and moved back in with his parents. In September 2009, Shkreli started his second hedge fund, MSMB Capital Management, which took its name from the initials of the two founding portfolio managers, Shkreli and his childhood friends, Mark Bistek. They developed a reputation for shorting biotech companies and then using stock chat rooms and other aggressive tactics to savage them, to cause the stock to go down. So he liked to put his thumb on the scale. As Shkreli wrote for one investment site, clinical data can be misleading, innocently biased, meaningless, manipulated, and sometimes even downright doctored. Shkreli had a really good knowledge of who was faking drug results and who was gaming the system. But he was willing to take a lot of risk and do things other people won't do. In 2011, Shkreli filed requests with the FDA to reject a new cancer diagnostics device from Navidea Biopharmaceuticals and an inhalable insulin therapy from Mankind Corporation while publicly short-selling both company stocks, the values which dropped after Shkreli's interventions. The company had difficulty launching the products as a result, although the FDA ultimately approved both. In 2011, MSMB made an unsolicited cash bid for AMAG Pharmaceuticals at a price of $378. Shkreli founded Retrophin, a portmanteau of recombinant dystrophin, in 2011 under the MSMB umbrella and ran it as a portfolio company with an emphasis on biotechnology to create treatments for rare diseases. In the spring of 2012, MSMB announced that it was investing $4 million in Retrophin, and Shkreli said that he was going to wind down MSMB to devote all of his time to the new company. Shkreli has claimed that he left the lucrative world of hedge funds for big pharma because he just couldn't make enough money in hedge funds. Another reason he claims that he wanted to switch careers was supposedly he had gone through a turning point in early 2011 after being moved by the plight of a young boy who had succumbed to a rare type of muscular dystrophy. What a guy. Shkreli said he then decided to devote himself to developing treatments for this and other rare diseases. Yet another explanation for Shkreli's big switch came out in a lawsuit filed against him in 2012 by Retrophin itself. The lawsuit alleges that he set up Retrophin to, quote, create an asset that he might be able to use to placate his MSMB capital investors, end quote. That's because, according to the suit, he had lost more than $7 million on a disastrous trade involving a company called Orexin Therapeutics, in which he took a massive short position. He then lied to Merrill Lynch about being able to settle that position, which led to Merrill's closing out the position at a huge loss. Retrofin's 2015 SEC complaint contended that Shkreli had created MSMB Healthcare and Retrofin so that he could continue trading after MSMB Capital became insolvent and to create an asset that he might be able to use to placate his MSMB Capital investors. Again, thumb on the scale. Moving on. According to the indictment, Instead of telling investors that he had lost their money on September 10th, 2012, he sent an email claiming he had just about doubled their money net of fees, previously having told one investor that MSMB had $35 million in his coffers when actually he only had $700. He offered the investors a choice of cash or shares in Retrofin, where he said he was now going to focus his time. A firm which sued him over an unpaid bill wrote in its lawsuit, which was eventually settled, at bottom, Retrofin is simply Shkreli's alter ego, formed to defraud his bona fide investors and creditors. In late 2012, Shkreli took Retrofin public through what's known as a reverse merger, in which you merge a new business into an existing publicly traded shell, thereby getting stock that you can sell to investors. At the time, speculative biotech stocks were so hot, and Shkreli was apparently so convincing, and his ideas seemed so brilliant, that in early 2013, he was able to raise $9 million. And with that, Retrofin was off and running. Those who questioned Retrofin found themselves the target of bashing on Twitter from accounts with names like @thug_bioanalyst, who affected the persona of a gangster rapper. In the summer of 2014, journalist Adam Feuerstein reported that the tweets were being written by Retrofin employees. Shkreli said that he couldn't control what his employees did on the internet, but I think we all know where the tweets were coming from. In May 2014, Shkreli had difficulty accessing public markets for capital, but received a $4 million Series A funding round and a PIPE deal valued at $10 million that was underwritten by Roth Capital Partners. After obtaining the financing, Shkreli was able to acquire rights to market tryptophan, brand name Thiola, a drug used to treat the rare disease cystinuria, and other drug Chenodal, and subsequently raised the price of each drug substantially, with Thiola being marked up about 20-fold from $1.50 to $30 per pill, and patients must take about 10 to 15 pills a day. And Chenodal about 5-fold. Retrofin did not lower the price of these drugs after Shkreli's departure, just FYI. Imprimis Pharmaceuticals introduced a lower-cost version of Thiola marketed as a compound drug. So, people that are on that drug are okay. Surprising absolutely no one, Retrofin's board decided to replace Shkreli in September of 2014, and he resigned from the company the following month. He was replaced by Stephen Asalaj. After Shkreli's departure, Retrofin filed a $65 million lawsuit against him in August of 2015, claiming that he had breached his duty of loyalty to the biopharmaceutical company. That's hard to say. And in a long-running dispute over his use of company funds, and committed stock trading irregularities and other violations of securities rules. Essentially, the allegations are that he stole both cash and shares worth millions of dollars from Retrofin, disguising them in some cases as consulting arrangements in order to give a small group of insiders, pay off creditors, and his former MSMB investors, some of whom were complaining to the SEC, and settle other lawsuits. Mere days after his unceremonious departure from Retrofin, Shkreli set up new offices in a new company, Turing, after Alan Turing. He launched Turing with 3 drugs in development acquired from Retrofin, an intranasal version of ketamine for depression, an intranasal version of oxytocin, and Vicamol for hypertension. Shkreli set a business strategy for Turing to obtain license for out-of-patent medicines and reevaluate the pricing of each in pursuit of windfall profits for the new company and bring its own drugs to market. As markets for out-of-patent drugs are often small and obtaining regulatory approval to manufacture a generic version is expensive, Turing calculated that with closed distribution for the products and no competition, it could set higher prices. On August 10th of 2015, in accordance with Shkreli's business plan, Turing acquired Daraprim, a medication approved by the FDA in 1953 from Impax Laboratories for $55 million. The drug's most prominent use as of late 2015 was as an anti-malaria and an antiparasitic, in conjunctions with leucovorin and sulfazodiazine. I would never make it as a doctor, just saying. That would treat patients with both AIDS-related and AIDS-related toxoplasmosis. The patent for Daraprim had expired, but no generic version was available. The Turing-Impax deal included the condition that Impax remove the drug from regular wholesalers and pharmacy. So, in June of 2015, 2 months before the sale to Turing was announced, Impax switched to tightly controlled distribution. In keeping with its strategy for pricing in the face of limited competition, Turing maintained the closed distribution. The New York Times noted that the deal made sense only if Turing planned to raise the price of the drug substantially. On September 17th of 2015, Dave Morio of Helio, an in-depth clinical information website for healthcare specialists, reported on a letter from the Infectious Disease Society of America and the HIV Medicine Associations to executive at Turing, questioning the new pricing for Daraprim. The price of a dose of the drug in the U.S. market increased by a factor of 56, from $13.50 to $750 per pill overnight. The price increase was initially criticized jointly by the Infectious Disease Society of America and the HIV Medicine Association by the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, and soon thereafter by presidential candidates Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump. A subsequent organized effort called on Turing to return pricing to pre-September levels and to address several matters relating to the needs of patients, an effort that garnered endorsements from more than 160 medical specialty and patient-related organizations. In response to the controversy, the record label Collect Record publicly ended its business relationship with Shkreli, who invested in the company. In a September 2015 interview with Bloomberg Markets, Shkreli claimed that despite the pricing increase, patient copays would actually be lower, that many patients would get the drug at no cost, that Turing had expanded its free drug program, and that it sold half of its drugs for $1. A few days later, Shkreli announced that he planned to lower the price by an unspecified amount in response to the anger that was felt by people. But in late November, Turing reversed course and said it would not lower the price after all. On October 22, 2015, Mark L. Baum, CEO of Imprimis Pharmaceuticals, announced that his company would provide a combination products containing priamethanine, the active ingredient in Daraprim, and leucovorin at $1 a pill as a cheaper and more efficient alternative to Daraprim. This product was intended to be used alongside sulfadiazine in standard protocol to treat toxoplasmosis typically seen in AIDS patients. On November 23, 2015, Turing announced that the company would not reduce the list price of Daraprim, but said it planned instead to negotiate volume discounts of up to 50% for hospitals. Turing issued a statement that it was not as important to cut the list price as to reduce the cost to hospitals where most patients get their initial treatment. The company pledged that no patients needing Daraprim would ever be denied access. Infectious disease specialists and patient advocates, including Tim Horn of the Treatment Action Group and Carlos Del Rio of HIV Medicine Association, said Turing's actions were insufficient given that patients initially treated for days at a hospital typically have to continue the treatment for weeks or months at home. On December 17, 2015, Shkreli was arrested by the FBI after a federal indictment in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York was filed, charging him with securities fraud. These charges were filed after an investigation into his tenure at MSMB Capital Management and Retrofin. He was accused of running a Ponzi-like scheme. More on Ponzi schemes to come. Federal prosecutors said that Shkreli and co-defendant Evan Griebel engaged in multiple schemes to ensnare investors through a web of lies and deceit. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Shkreli said that he was targeted by law enforcement for his price hikes of the drug Daraprim and his flamboyant personality. Prosecutors said a mountain of testimony and evidence at the trial showed that Shkreli duped multiple investors into putting millions of dollars into two hedge funds he ran, MSMB Capital and MSMB Healthcare, by falsely claiming to have an excellent record of running such funds and by falsely stating his investment strategy had a low level of risk. After getting their money, according to prosecutors, Shkreli quickly lost most of it and also used some of it to capitalize his infant company, Retrofin, even as he continued sending out financial statements to investors claiming positive results. And when investors asked for their money to be redeemed to them in cash, Shkreli brushed them off for months or more, inventing excuses and suggesting alternate ways to pay them back. On August 4th, 2017, the trial jury found Shkreli guilty on 2 counts of securities fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and not guilty on 5 other counts. Shkreli said he was delighted with the outcome and described the prosecution as a witch hunt of epic proportions. I can't even get that out of my mouth. It's so crazy. 2 of the security fraud counts for which Shkreli was convicted related to those MSMB hedge funds. Prosecutors said that he then improperly used the Retrofin stock and cash from the young firm to pay off the funds. Investors. Shkreli was acquitted of 1 Retrofin-related count. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit securities fraud connected with Retrofin. On September 13, 2017, his bail was revoked following a Facebook post offering $5,000 for a strand of Hillary Clinton's hair, which the judge perceived as solicitation to assault, which is not protected under the First Amendment. Shkreli's post was preceded by others that suggested that he might have plans to clone Hillary Clinton. Shkreli said that the post was satire, and his lawyer described it as tasteless but not a threat. Shkreli edited the post to add a disclaimer that it was satire, and later said he did this minutes after publication. Shkreli apologized for the post, but he was still sent to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. As of today, Shkreli is serving his sentence at FCC Allenwood. He made a request for compassionate release on April 22nd of 2020. In his request, he said he should be allowed to live at his new fiance's apartment in New York City. Her name was redacted from the copies released to the press. In his request, he claimed his firm needed him to develop a remedy for COVID-19. In denying the request, Judge Matsumoto, who was the trial court judge, characterized Shkreli's request as an instance of delusional self-aggrandizing behavior. Reports are now indicating that he is running the entire empire from his cell with a contraband cell phone. So yeah, Pharma Bro is trashy, but too smart for his own good. On that note, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to give you the top 10 most successful mobile gaming apps.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings-on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year, to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
Welcome back. We just finished going over the crimes and bad deeds of Pharma Bro, and I'm going to pivot again a little bit with our top 10 most downloaded games. If I look at any of your phones, dear listeners, aside from your favorite podcast app, don't forget to subscribe to the GSMC Financial News Podcast, you probably have at least one game. The one you use to pass time while waiting in your car, the one you play when you can't sleep, and the one you play because you're just obsessed with it. What did we do before smartphones? I was probably so bored. Well, so what's the game everybody has? Here are the top 10 gaming apps according to App Annie data with the most downloads from January 1st, 2010 through January 1st, 2020. At number 10, we have 8-Ball Pool. 8-Ball is the biggest multiplayer pool game on the planet. You can play for free against other players and friends in one-on-one matches and enter into multiplayer tournaments for the Billiards Crowns. Miniclip's 8-Ball Pool is also available to play on the web, iOS, and Android devices. You can start playing as a Miniclip member, a Facebook user, or as a guest member, that last requiring no registration or username. Once you're in, you can either play with friends or get matched up one-on-one with random users. There is a third option to play a tournament, but the game says that feature is coming soon. Strangely, I noticed in other users' profile that they had played in tournaments already, so who knows what that is. The game consists of 5 levels: London, Sydney, Moscow, Tokyo, and Las Vegas. To play around, each player pays the entry fee in in-game currency. The levels have you progressively pay you higher fees. If you win the game, you'll win twice the amount you paid. Basically, you win your coins back plus your opponent's share. If you lose a game, you can lose the coins, but you won't drop below 0. Using your finger, you can adjust the angle of your cue stick. You can see the trajectories of both your cue ball and the ball you're aiming for. To play after the rack is broken by the cue ball, you simply adjust the angle of your pool stick with your finger. 2 lines will then appear, one showing the trajectory of the ball you're aiming for, and the other the trajectory of the cue ball. Once everything is adjusted to your liking, pull back the power meter to determine the strike of your strike. The farther down you pull and release, the harder you'll strike the cue. To keep the game moving along, each player gets 30 seconds to set up and complete a shot. If you take longer than that, not only will you lose your turn, but your opponent can move the cue ball to wherever he or she wants, known as ball in hand. To win the pot, either all the solid or all the striped balls, and get the 8-ball last. This is perfect for those of us who are missing nights at the local bar, hanging with friends, and playing pool. Number 9 is Fruit Ninja. Their motto is slice fruit, don't slice bombs. That's all you need to know to get started with the addictive Fruit Ninja action. You slice fruit with a blade controlled via the touchscreen as the fruit is thrown into the screen, across the screen to create a slicing motion, attempting to slice the fruit in half. Extra points are awarded for slicing multiple fruits with one swipe, called combos, and players can use additional fingers to make multiple slices simultaneously. Players must slice all fruit. If 3 fruits are missed, the game ends, unless calligraphy brush is used. But upon reaching scores that are multiples of 100, the player will gain an extra life, unless they have not missed a piece of fruit already. Bombs are occasionally thrown into the screen, and will also end the game should the player slice them. Challenge yourself and see how long you can last in classic mode, set a higher score in arcade mode, or simply practice your fruit slicing skills in Zen mode. A wide range of blades and dojos are at your disposal to help you cut the way you want. Want more fun? Take a break and experience a new way to slice your favorite fruit with mini games, or test your mastery of the game and win prizes. I think there's something for everyone in this game. At number 8, we have Minion Rush, Despicable Me. Play the game by controlling a minion, and that minion can either be Dave, who is the default character, Carl, Jerry, or Mel. They can also compete with others in hilarious, fast-paced challenges. While the minion runs, there are 3 lanes on the track, with some floating bananas on it, which minions can collect by being controlled to move left or right or run through them. Minions should avoid obstacles, swipe up to jump and down to duck, and attacks from bosses unless they are equipped with certain power-ups, and they can get prizes including bananas, coins, costume cards, and token. In addition, minions can run in different costumes once purchased. The concept of the game is relevant to the Despicable Me 2 movie. Our minion runners work for the AVL and need to complete certain missions requiring collecting bananas, jumping obstacles, and collecting stars on the moon, and many more. So this game is really an interactive way to enjoy one of your favorite movies. I think that's great. At number 7 is Hill Climb Racing. The object of hill climb racing is to drive as far through progressively difficult racing stages as possible while collecting coins. Taking advantage of the non-realistic physics and using only 2 simple controls, the gas and the brake pedals, fuel is replenished by picking up gas canisters or batteries along the way. You can perform stunts such as driving the vehicle into the air for a prolonged time, or flipping it over to earn more coins, which, after the race, may be spent on upgrades to unlock new stages and vehicles, including monster trucks, dirt bikes, tanks, and Santa's sleigh. Conditions ending the game are depleting the vehicle's fuel or hitting the driving avatar's head. This game is not the most original or incredibly pretty, but it's fun and it's free. There's also a Hill Climb Racing 2 if you've mastered the original version. Number 6 is Pooh. Pooh is your cute alien pet who loves to eat and play. It's today's version of Tamagotchi. Pooh has 4 status bars: the hunger bar, the health or vitality bar, the happiness bar, and the sleep bar. These affect the gameplay. Pooh is fed by dragging various food to its mouth. Certain foods affect Pooh's other stats too. On occasions, especially when fed the same food over and over again, it will refuse to eat the food and make a no song. Pooh's hunger increases over time, and this will drain the health bar. Pooh also gets dirty over time. It defecates, though it only does so in the bathroom, so the feces can only be seen when the player goes to the bathroom. Pooh can be cleaned by being rubbed with soap and washed off. Pooh can also be cleaned by holding the rain cloud over it instead of over the flowers, though this method is unreliable. Pooh's vitality is drained over time. The rate at it is draining is increased if the food or sleep meter is at 0%. The potions that are used to maintain Pooh's health are quite expensive and should be used sparingly. Pooh simulates parenting as the baby and the player is the parent. It's pretty realistic. People like it. Number 5. Everyone who has ever owned a smartphone has seen ads for a number 5 app, Clash of Titans. You can join millions of players worldwide as you build your village, raise a clan, and compete in the epic clan wars. Mustachioed barbarians, fire-wielding wizards, and other unique troops are waiting for you. Enter the world of Clash. Features are you can join a clan, you can fight in the clan wars, you can test your skills in the competitive clan war leagues and prove you're the best, work together with your clan in clan games to earn valuable magic items, defend your village with a multitude of cannons, bombs, traps, motors, and walls. Fight against the Goblin King in a campaign through the realm. Plan unique battle strategies with countless combination of spells, troops, and heroes. Friendly challenges, friendly wars, and special events. Although Clash of the Clans is free to download and play, additional in-game currency can be purchased for real money from the Apple App Store, Google Play Store in the form of in-app purchases. However, all features of the game are open to players who choose not to make in-app purchases. If you don't want to use this feature, you should disable the in-app purchases if you're in your device's settings. Clash of the Clans is available on iOS and Android. This is a fun RPG that is really remarkable for a free app. Number 4 is our favorite smart talking cat, My Talking Tom, which is also the name of one of my cats. So, yeah, I think that's funny. This is another Tamagotchi-style app that offers in-app purchases. My Talking Tom is the best virtual pet game for the whole family. Players can adopt Tom, which we did, and take care of him every day, which we do, making sure he gets enough food and sleep, taking him to the toilet, and keeping him happy. The goal of the game is to take care of an anthropomorphic cat. The player is invited to take care of Tom and help him grow from a baby kitten to a full-grown tomcat by interacting with him in different ways, such as feeding him, taking him to the bathroom, playing mini games, and tucking him into his bed as he sleeps when he's tired. Tom can repeat words spoken into the device's microphone for up to 25 seconds using a synthesized voice, and kids love this option. Using in-game currency, you have access to different outfits, skins, or accessories, so it's fun. Number 3 is my personal favorite, Temple Run 2. It reminds me of one of my favorite old-time video games, Pitfall, with a little bit of Indiana Jones thrown in. Temple Run 2 is an endless running video game developed and published by Imanji Studios. It's a sequel to Temple Run, but the gameplay itself is slightly different because it introduces new obstacles like zip lines, mine tracks, sharper turns, waterfalls, and jets of fire. The game also features new power-ups whose use is typically governed by an energy bar that is filled up by collecting coins. And players now have the ability to save the protagonist from death by using green gems that are collected while running or purchased online. The game is set in a different location than the first game, and the main character runs faster. The 3 monkeys that chase the character in the original game have been eliminated. Now a singular and large monkey called Chunak is the sole antagonist. The number 2 app is literally the most addictive game I've ever played. Candy Crush Saga. Candy Crush Saga is a free-to-play match 3 puzzle video game released by King on April 12th of 2012. In the game, players complete levels by swapping colored pieces of candy on a game board to make a match of 3 or more of the same color, eliminating those candies from the board and replacing them with new ones, which could potentially create further matches. Matches of 4 or more candies create unique candies that act as power-ups with larger board-clearing abilities. Boards have various goals that must be completed within a fixed number of moves or a limited amount of time, such as certain score or collecting a specific type of candy. Candy Crush Saga is considered one of the first and most successful uses of a freemium model. While the game can be played competently through without spending money, players can actually buy special actions to help clear more difficult boards from which King makes its revenues. At its peak, the company was reportedly earning almost $1 million per day. The game is split among many levels, which must be completed in sequence. Each level poses a different challenge to the user, such as achieving a minimum score in a fixed number of moves, or clearing candies in a fixed number of moves to bring special ingredients to the bottom of the board. Boards have a number of different configurations, and many include special spaces that have their own unique rules. There are a number of Candy Crush spin-offs that I think are just perfect for when you're waiting for a new life on the main Candy Crush. At number 1, we have Subway Surfers. Like Temple Run, Subway Surfers is an endless runner game. You take the role of young graffiti artist who, upon being caught in the act of applying graffiti to or tagging a metro railway site, run through the railroad tracks to escape from the inspector and his dog. As they run, they grab gold coins, power-ups, and other items along the way, while simultaneously dodging collisions with trains and other objects, and can also jump on top of the trains and surf with hoverboards to evade the capture until the character crashes on an obstacle, getting caught by the inspector, or getting hit by a train. Special events, such as Weekly Hunt, can result in in-game rewards and characters. The game starts by tapping the touchscreen, while Jake, the game starter character, or any other character sprays graffiti on a train and then gets caught in the act by the inspector and his dog. There is an animated series based on this game and is now a relatively popular meme on TikTok. So that's it. I am super thankful for these games. They have saved me from many awkward situations and helped me pass the time, and in these days, get me away from the doom and gloom of everyday life. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Financial News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Find us on Twitter at GSMC Financial Podcast, and be sure to give us a like and a nice review on your favorite podcasting app. Stay healthy, wear a mask. See ya.
You've been listening to the GSMC Financial News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed today's podcast.